Before the Romans ever set foot on its shores, Britain was not a land without money. The story of our coinage does not begin with a king's face stamped in metal. It starts with the Celtic tribes of the Iron Age, around the 2nd century BC. These early Britons had strong trade links with their neighbours in Gaul, which is modern-day France. Through this trade, the very first coins trickled into the island. These coins were not made in Britain. They were copies of coins from far away, specifically the gold status of Philip II of Macedon, the father of Alexander the Great. It is a strange thought, isn't it? The first money here was a copy of a Greek coin brought over by the Gauls. These first coins were beautiful, abstract things. They were called staters. They were made mostly of gold, but sometimes silver or a cheaper metal called potin, a mix of tin and copper. The designs were not clear portraits like we see today. Instead, they showed stylized images. One side might have the faint, dreamlike shape of a horse. The other side might show a distorted head of the Greek god Apollo. The Celtic artists who made these copies were not trying to make a perfect likeness. They were creating their own art. The horse was a very important symbol to them. It represented power, wealth, and maybe even their gods. These coins were more than just money. They were symbols of a tribe's identity. The earliest British-made coins, known as the Gallo-Belgic staters, were cast rather than struck. This means molten metal was poured into a mold. The result was a coin that was often thick and a little rough. The designs were very simple at first. Sometimes they were just patterns of dots and crescents. Over time, different tribes in the southeast of England began to make their own unique coins. The Atrebates, the Catavilauni, the Asini, each had a style. You could tell where a coin was from just by looking at the strange, wonderful horse on its back. These coins were not used for buying bread at the market. They were for big things, paying soldiers, making offerings to the gods, or showing off your tribe's power. So, the story of British money begins not with a neat, orderly system, but with a beautiful, chaotic mix of art and trade. It begins with golden coins that crossed the sea and inspired the people of this island to create their own. These coins were heavy in the hand and rich with meaning. They tell us of a time before written history, a time of powerful tribes and mysterious beliefs. They are the very first chapter in a long, long story of how the people of this island have used metal to represent value, power, and their own place in the world. They were the pennies of their day, but to hold one is to hold the beginning of Britain's economic story. When the Romans invaded in AD 43, everything changed. The beautiful, chaotic world of Celtic coins was swept away by the organized might of the Roman Empire. The Romans brought their own money with them, and it was completely different. Roman coins were tools of the state. They were mass-produced and carried the face of the emperor. This was a new idea for Britain. Suddenly, the money in your hand was a direct message from the ruler in Rome. It said, "I am in charge." The coins were made of gold, the aureus, silver, the denarius, and bronze, the sestertius. They were used for everything, from paying the legions stationed at Hadrian's Wall to buying goods in the new towns like Londinium. For nearly 400 years, Roman coins were the only coins in Britain. Mints were even set up in London and Colchester to produce them. The designs changed with every new emperor. One year, you might have the face of Claudius, the next Nero. The back of the coins often showed images of Roman gods, military victories, or symbols of peace and prosperity. This was propaganda in your pocket. It was a constant reminder of Roman power and Roman culture. When you used a denarius to buy wine, you were taking part in the Roman economy. The old Celtic way of life and its coins faded into the background. Roman money was the law of the land, but empires do not last forever. Around the year AD 410, the Romans left Britain. They pulled their soldiers back to defend Rome, and the island was left to fend for itself. What followed was a period of great uncertainty, often called the Dark Ages. The Roman system of money collapsed completely. For a while, people went back to trading goods directly, a system known as barter. But soon, a new type of coin began to appear. These were small, thick silver coins called scatters. The name scat is an Old English word for wealth or treasure. These coins were the money of the new Anglo-Saxon kingdoms that were forming across England. The scatters were fascinating. They were not like the Roman coins that came before them. They were small, often no bigger than your little fingernail, and their designs were a strange and wonderful mix of styles. Some copied old Roman designs. Others had Christian symbols like the cross. Many had pictures of animals like wolves or birds, or strange mythical beasts. Some even had portraits of kings, but they were crude and simple, not the realistic portraits of the Romans. There were dozens of different types of sciatters made in different kingdoms like Kent, Mercia, and Northumbria. They show us a world where new ideas and old traditions were mixing together in a fascinating way. They were the first truly English coins. The age of the small, varied sciatters came to an end in the late 8th century. A powerful king named Offa, who ruled the kingdom of Mercia, decided that things needed to be more organized. Around the year 785, he introduced a new coin. It was wider and thinner than the sciatter. It was made of good quality silver, and it would become the most important coin in English history for the next 500 years. This coin was the penny. Offa's penny set a new standard. It was based on a coin used by the great European emperor, Charlemagne. This showed that Offa saw himself as a major European ruler, not just a local Anglo-Saxon king. Offa's pennies were revolutionary. They had the king's name and his title rex, the Latin word for king, clearly written on them. They also had the name of the moneyer, the person who was responsible for making the coin. This was a clever way to control the quality of the money. If a coin was found to be underweight or made of bad silver, you knew who to blame. The designs were also much better than the scatters. They had clear, well-made portraits of the king. For the first time since the Romans, the coins of England carried a powerful and realistic image of the ruler. This was a powerful statement of royal authority. When the Normans, led by William the Conqueror, invaded England in 1066, they did not get rid of the penny. They recognized that it was a very good system. Instead, they took control of it. William kept the Anglo-Saxon system of mints, which were located in towns all over the country. But he made sure that the coins now showed his face. The design of the penny changed regularly, every few years. This was a clever way for the king to make money. Everyone had to bring their old coins to the mint to be melted down and made into new coins. The king would take a fee for this service. This was a form of taxation. The Norman pennies show us the face of power. The portraits of William the Conqueror and his sons are stern and fearsome. They are shown facing forward, holding a sword. The message was clear: this is your new king, and he is a warrior. The back of the coin usually had a cross design. This was not just a religious symbol, it was also a practical guide. To get a halfpenny, you would literally cut the penny in half along the lines of the cross. To get a farthing or a quarter penny, you would cut it into 4 pieces. For centuries, the silver penny, and the pieces you cut from it, was the only coin that most people ever used. For a long time after the Norman conquest, the silver penny remained the king of coins. Life went on, and the penny was the money that bought your food, paid your rent, and filled the church collection plate. But as trade grew in the 13th century, a problem arose. The penny was too small for big transactions. Imagine a rich merchant trying to buy a shipload of wool using thousands and thousands of tiny silver pennies. It was not practical. In 1279, a great change came under King Edward I. He was a strong and organized king, and he decided to reform the country's money completely. This event is called the Great Recoinage of 1279. Edward I introduced several new coins. The most important was the groat, which was worth 4 pennies. This was a big, heavy silver coin that made large payments much easier. He also brought in a halfpenny and a farthing as actual coins, so people no longer had to cut up their pennies. This made daily shopping much simpler for ordinary folk. All these new coins had a new, standardized design. On the front was a portrait of the king, and on the back was a long cross that went right to the edge of the coin. This design made it harder for criminals to clip silver from the edge of the coin, which was a common problem. As the Middle Ages continued, another new coin appeared. This was the gold noble, first issued by Edward III in 1344. This was a truly magnificent coin, one of the most beautiful ever made in England. It was large and made of pure gold. The design showed the king standing in a ship, holding a sword and a shield. This image was a powerful symbol of England's growing strength as a sea power and a trading nation. The gold noble was not for everyday people. It was a coin for international merchants, for nobles, and for the king himself. It was worth 6 shillings and 8 pence, which was a huge amount of money at the time. The medieval period also saw the introduction of coins like the shilling. But the penny, the groat, and the noble were the stars of the show. The designs on the coins tell a story of growing royal power. The portraits of the kings became more and more realistic. Henry VII, the first Tudor king, was the first to be shown in a true, lifelike profile on his coins, rather than the simple, forward-facing portraits of earlier kings. This was a new way of showing the king not just as a symbol of power, but as an individual man. The money in people's pockets was becoming a gallery of royal portraits, changing with each new monarch who sat on the throne. The Tudor period, beginning with Henry VII in 1485, was, well, a time of great change in England, and you can really see this reflected in the coins of the era. Henry VII introduced 2 very important new coins that would, become quite famous. The first was the shilling, or testoon, issued in 1504, and it was worth 12 pennies. For the first time ever, a coin featured a realistic profile portrait of the king. The second, and honestly much more impressive, was the gold sovereign. First minted in 1489, this was the largest and most valuable coin yet made in England. It showed the king in all his glory, seated on his throne. It really was a spectacular piece of propaganda, meant to impress everyone with the power and majesty of the new Tudor dynasty. Now, Henry's son, Henry VIII, is famous for a lot of things. His 6 wives come to mind. But in the world of coins, he's known for something else entirely: the Great Debasement. To pay for his expensive wars with France and Scotland, Henry started mixing less valuable metals, like copper, with the silver and gold in his coins. People actually started calling him Old Coppernose. That was because on the silver-coated shillings, the silver would rub off the high point of the coin, the king's nose, showing the cheap copper underneath. This was frankly a disaster for the economy. People just lost faith in the money. It was a hard lesson that the value of a coin really depends on the trust people have in the monarch. When Elizabeth I came to the throne, one of her first jobs was to fix the mess her father had left behind. She issued new coins made of good quality silver and gold, restoring public confidence. The coins from her long reign are, I must say, some of the most beautiful ever produced. They include the gold sovereign, the pound, the crown, and the half-crown. For the first time, a date was regularly put on the coins. The portraits of Elizabeth show her aging over the years, from a young woman to the famous Virgin Queen of her later years. Her coins were used all over the known world, carried by English sailors and merchants on their great voyages of discovery. The Stuart kings who followed Elizabeth, James I and Charles I, continued this tradition of fine coinage. Charles I's reign, though, ended in civil war, and that led to the creation of some of the most interesting coins in English history. During the war, both the king and parliament needed to pay their armies, so they set up emergency mints all over the country. Some coins were even made in castles that were under siege. They were often crudely made, sometimes on odd-shaped pieces of silver plate that had just been cut up. These siege pieces are incredibly rare, and honestly, they tell a dramatic story of a country torn apart by conflict. They are a physical link to one of the most turbulent times in English history. After the turmoil of the Civil War and the short-lived Republic under Oliver Cromwell, King Charles II was restored to the throne in 1660. The country's money was in a terrible state. Many of the coins in circulation were old, worn and clipped hammered coins from the times of Elizabeth I and before. It was time for another major change. In 1662, a new technology was introduced, the screw press. This machine produced perfectly round coins with decorated edges. This was the end of hammered coinage and the beginning of milled coinage. These new coins were much harder to clip or counterfeit, which helped to restore trust in the currency. This period saw the birth of a coin that would become a classic, the guinea. First issued in 1663, it was a gold coin intended to be worth £1 or 20 shillings. It got its name because the gold used to make the first ones came from the Guinea coast of Africa. However, the value of gold went up, and for most of its life, the guinea was actually worth 21 shillings. It became the coin of gentlemen, of professionals, and of high-end trade. When you read a Jane Austen novel and a character talks about a payment in guineas, it was a sign of a certain social class. The guinea was a symbol of respectable wealth. One of the most enduring new designs of this era appeared on the copper halfpenny and farthing of 1672. For the first time, the figure of Britannia was used on a coin. She was shown seated on a rock, holding a spear and an olive branch, with a shield bearing the Union flag. This image of a female warrior personifying the nation became incredibly popular. It was a powerful symbol of Britain's growing confidence as a naval and commercial power. The model for this first Britannia was said to be Frances Stuart, the Duchess of Richmond, a famous beauty at the court of Charles II. Britannia has remained on our coins in various forms ever since. The problem of old, worn-out silver coins did not go away, however. By the 1690s, the situation was critical. Most of the silver coins in circulation were worth less than half their face value. The government decided on another great recoinage in 1696. The man put in charge of the project at the Royal Mint was one of the greatest scientists in history, Sir Isaac Newton. He took the job very seriously. He worked tirelessly to recall all the old hammered coins and replace them with new, reliable, milled silver. He also pursued counterfeiters with great energy. Newton's work helped to stabilize the nation's finances and set the stage for the economic growth of the 18th century. The 18th century was a time of great industrial and commercial expansion for Britain, but curiously, it was a quiet time for the Royal Mint. For long periods, very few silver or copper coins were produced. This created a major shortage of small change, which was a huge problem for the new factories that needed to pay their workers. In response, private companies and towns started to make their own tokens. These copper tokens had all sorts of interesting designs, showing local buildings, famous people, or the products the company made. They are a fascinating window into the daily life of the Industrial Revolution. The official shortage of copper coins was finally addressed in 1797. The government gave a contract to a Birmingham factory owner named Matthew Boulton. Boulton was a brilliant engineer who had invented a new steam-powered coin press. He produced huge, heavy copper pennies and twopence coins. They were so big and solid that people nicknamed them cartwheels. The quality was so high that it put the private token makers out of business. These cartwheel pennies were the first coins to be truly mass-produced by machine, a symbol of the new industrial age. They were big, bold, and powerful, just like the Britain of that era. The greatest coin of the 19th century, however, was the new gold sovereign. It was introduced in 1817 as part of another big reform of the coinage after the Napoleonic Wars. The guinea was retired and the new sovereign was brought in with a value of exactly £1 or 20 shillings. On the back of this new coin was a magnificent design by an Italian artist named Benedetto Pistrucci. It showed St. George on horseback, slaying a dragon. This dynamic and heroic image became instantly iconic. It is perhaps the most famous design in the history of British coins, and it is still used on sovereigns today. The reign of Queen Victoria, from 1837 to 1901, was the golden age of the sovereign. Britain was at the height of its imperial power, and the gold sovereign was the most trusted and recognized coin in the entire world. It was the chief coin of the world. The London Mint produced millions of them, but so did new branch mints set up in the empire, in places like Sydney, Melbourne and Perth, in Australia. The portrait of Victoria on her coins changed over her long reign, showing her as a young girl, a mature queen, and finally, the old veiled widow. The Victorian sovereign is a powerful symbol of a confident global empire. The 20th century brought dramatic changes to British life, and the coins in people's pockets reflected this. The two world wars had a huge impact. The gold sovereign, which had been the backbone of the currency, was withdrawn from circulation during the First World War. The government needed the gold to pay for the war effort. Paper money, in the form of £1 and 10 shilling notes, took its place for everyday use. Gold coins would never again be used as common currency in Britain. It was the end of an era. People had to get used to the feel of paper instead of the weight of gold. Another major change came in 1920. For centuries, British silver coins had been made of sterling silver, which is 92.5% pure. But the cost of silver rose dramatically after the war. To save money, the government reduced the silver content of the coins to just 50%. The rest was made up of cheaper metals. Then, in 1947, silver was removed from circulating coins altogether. From that point on, silver coins like the shilling and the florin were made from a mixture of copper and nickel, known as cupro-nickel. They still looked silver, but their real metallic value was gone. The age of precious metal in everyday money was truly over. The biggest single change in the history of British money came on February 15th, 1971. This was Decimal Day. The old complicated system of pounds, shillings and pence was swept away. For centuries, £1 had been equal to 20 shillings and 1 shilling had been equal to 12 pennies. And this meant there were 240 pennies in a pound. School children had to learn difficult arithmetic to handle it. The new decimal system was much simpler. The pound was kept, but it was now divided into 100 new pence. New coins were introduced: the halfpenny, 1 penny, 2 pence, 5 pence, 10 pence, and 50 pence. The 50 pence was a revolutionary coin, the world's first 7-sided coin. Since decimalisation, the coins have continued to evolve. The halfpenny was withdrawn as inflation made it worthless. The pound coin was introduced in 1983 to replace the flimsy £1 note. The £2 coin followed in 1997. The designs have also been updated. In 2008, a clever new set of designs by Matthew Dent was introduced. The reverses of the 1 penny, 2 pence, 5 pence, 10 pence, 20 pence, and 50 pence coins each show a small part of the Royal Shield of Arms. When you put them all together, they form the complete shield like a puzzle. This was a fresh and modern idea, connecting the newest coins back to the ancient traditions of heraldry and the monarchy. Why do people get so excited about old English coins? Why would a small piece of metal, once worth just a penny, now be worth a fortune? The answer is a combination of history, rarity, and human passion. Each coin is a miniature time capsule. It tells us who was in power, what they valued, and the level of artistry and technology they had. Holding a Roman denarius found in a British field connects you directly to the Roman occupation. Owning a Charles I siege piece is to hold a relic from the Civil War. This connection to the past is a powerful draw for collectors, who are the guardians of this history. Rarity is the key factor that turns an old coin into a valuable treasure. Some coins were only made in very small numbers. Others were part of a series that was quickly recalled and melted down. A famous example is the 1933 penny. Only a handful were ever made, as the mint had enough pennies in circulation that year. None were meant for the public, but a few escaped. In 2016, one of these sold for £72,000. Another legendary coin is the Edward VIII threepence from 1937. Edward abdicated before his coins could be issued, and almost all were destroyed. The few that survive are incredibly valuable. It is the story behind the coin, the what if, that makes it so desirable. Sometimes a coin becomes valuable because of a mistake. These are known as error coins. Perhaps the date was stamped incorrectly, or the wrong design was used, or the coin was struck on the wrong metal. Collectors love these oddities. A famous modern example is the 2008 dateless 20p piece. A batch of coins was accidentally minted without the year on it. As soon as people realized this, they started checking their change. Finding one was like winning a small lottery prize. These stories capture the public imagination and get more people interested in the coins in their pockets. It adds a treasure hunt element to the hobby. Ultimately, the market for English coins is strong because it is a story that is still being written. The Royal Mint continues to produce special commemorative coins for collectors, celebrating everything from royal weddings to the Olympic Games. This keeps the hobby alive and attracts new generations. The stories of coins making people rich are rare, but they highlight a deeper truth. These coins are not just money, they are artifacts of our national story. From the first abstract Celtic status to the modern puzzle piece designs, they trace the journey of a nation. For a collector to own a piece of that journey is a reward that goes far beyond its monetary value. It is the ultimate pride.